It all goes back to November 20th, when CIA Chief Avril Haines briefed NATO ambassadors in Brussels on intelligence reports that Russia had massed 10,000 troops at the border with Ukraine and was planning an invasion. This past week, according to CNN, an unnamed White House official, possibly Jake Sullivan, mentioned a 4-week window left to prevent such an invasion, noting that, were that to happen, the sanctions against Russia would be overwhelming, immediate, and inflict significant cost on the Russian economy and their financial system. While such accusations were met with skepticism by the Europeans and rejected by the Russians, the reality is a massive buildup and activity of NATO forces in Ukraine. CIA leaker David Ignatius told the Washington Post that the U.S. is planning to support anti-Russian military insurgency in Ukraine. In a recent briefing, Kremlin spokeswoman Maria Zakharova reported that 10,000 NATO soldiers, including 4,000 Americans, are already stationed and active in Ukraine. Drones and stingers have been provided and used recently by pro-government forces in eastern Ukraine. In light of all this threatening activity on its border, President Putin presented to the West on December 17th 2 treaties to be signed, one with the US, the other with NATO, the essence of which is that the West engages itself not to threaten Russia's borders by offering membership to Ukraine or by arming and basing missiles in Ukraine. Putin stated, "You are on our doorstep. We cannot back down." The Russian president promised a military and technical response if the Western rivals don't stop their offensive. So far, however, only NATO's Stoltenberg has responded to Putin's treaties, rejecting them out of hand. Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko said on December 18th, "The moment of truth has come. We have reached the red line, and our proposals aim to pull us away from this red line and to start a normal dialogue." Grushko stated that NATO has been living in a fantasy world and that Europeans must think about whether they mean to turn their continent into a field of military confrontation. That the Ukrainian question poses an existential danger to Russia is clear. Even former US ambassadors to Russia, who have often downplayed the danger of a nuclear war emerging out of that conflict, have come to realize the danger. Former US Ambassador to Russia, Jack Matlock, for instance, wrote in Krasno Analysis on December 14th that interference by the US and its NATO allies in Ukraine's civil struggle has exacerbated the crisis within NATO and raised the specter of possible conflict between the nuclear powers. Russia is extremely sensitive about foreign military activity adjacent to its borders. He added, as any other country would be, and as the United States has always been. Russia has signaled repeatedly that it will stop at nothing to prevent NATO membership for Ukraine. Ukraine's friends in Europe and America should help them understand, rather, that Ukraine is pursuing what could easily turn out to be a suicidal course, he concluded. Back in October 1962, it was the US southern border that was being approached closely by Soviet soldiers and missiles in Cuba, which threatened a devastating first strike. Today, it is the relentless march of NATO closer and closer to Russia's borders. 60 years ago, President John F. Kennedy said, "Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island." And he said that this is in an area well known to have a special and historical relationship to the US, and is a deliberately provocative and unjustified change in the status quo, which cannot be accepted by this country. How were President Kennedy's demands that the Soviet Union remove and never again try to place nuclear-capable missiles and aircraft virtually on the U.S. border and in an area with a special and historical relationship to the U.S., different from President Putin's agreement proposed on December 7th to President Biden, that the United States ensure that Ukraine would not join NATO and thereby have U.S. and NATO forces and missiles of various types placed right on Russia's border, and in an area with a special and historical relationship to Russia, in fact, for centuries, a part of it. In October 1962, hundreds of millions of people around the world were terrified of an imminent nuclear war. And now, it is long past time for our populations to wake up and act.